What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue, and I hope you're all doing well today. For this video, we'll be going over the Legion Timewalking Mage Tower event and the fight overview and guide for Subtlety Rogue so you can take on Archmage Xylem. I would say of the 3 Rogue challenges, this was probably the one that I had the most fun overall doing. Now, if you need a sort of short explanation of how Legion Timewalking and the Mage Tower thing's gonna work, then please continue listening to this part of the video. If not, feel free to skip ahead. There's gonna be a timestamp somewhere on the screen like right now, so that way you can go to see exactly how the Xylem encounter works, as well as my recommendations on talents and how to handle the fight. Alright, so each spec in the game will be given access to one of 7 different fights, and by beating your encounter, you earn a special armor appearance set for your class. From my testing, your character must be at least level 50 to do the Legion Mage Tower event, and the Legion Timewalking weekly event has to be active. To start the Mage Tower challenge, you kinda need to go to the Mage Tower, so you'll be heading to the Broken Shore. This is a zone that's part of the Broken Isles, which was part of the Legion expansion. If you've never done any of the Legion stuff before, then you should still be able to take a portal to Asuna from your portal room in either Orgrimmar or Stormwind, depending on your faction. I did test this on some level 50 characters that I know never touched Legion before, and the portal was there for them, but if for whatever reason you don't see it, then you might need to do the introductory quest chain for Legion on that character. You can do this by finding your mission board in your main capital city, and there should be like a breadcrumb quest that leads you to it. Once you're in the Broken Isles, you'll have to fly over to the Broken Shore, which is in the southeast section of the map. Head to the coordinates 4562, and you should see an NPC named War Counselor Victoria. Talking to her will allow you to select a challenge for your currently active talent specialization. Do note, when you enter the Mage Tower fight, you are scaled down to level 45 and your gear is dropped down to item level 50. This means that virtually any character that you have will be able to do this since all your gear gets dropped down to item level 50, so the challenge is relatively balanced in that regard. Also, none of your borrowed powers or abilities like Covenant things, like Soulbinds, or Legendaries, or Conduits, or the Codex of Ultimate Wisdom, or whatever the heck they put in the game in the future, none of that is going to work in the Mage Tower since they've already basically hotfixed everything out of it, so even if you don't have a super geared character, this shouldn't really affect your progress at all. Alright, so now that the basics of the whole Mage Tower thing are explained, let's go over the Archmage Xylem encounter. This is probably the longest of the 3 rogue fights and relies on quite a bit of moving around this sizable room, but overall it's not that hard of a fight once you know the mechanics. This encounter is broken up into 2 stages, and in the first stage you'll be fighting Archmage Xylem. His abilities will vary based on which school of magic he's currently using. He'll start the encounter using Frost magic with a simple Frost Bolt as his spammable ability. This should be kicked whenever you can, since it just avoids taking extra damage so that way he doesn't chip away at you. His annoying move is when he teleports to another corner of the room and drops a ton of Razor Ice and a Comet Storm on you. While you're surrounded by the Razor Ice, you're getting pelted with that Comet Storm, so you have 2 ways that you can get out of this situation. One, you can use your Shuriken Storms to generate a ton of combo points and funnel them into Eviscerates to cut a path through all the Razor Ices. Option 2 is that instead of standing out where I am in this footage, if you fight Xylem really close to that big purple orb in the middle of the room, then you should actually be able to reach him with a Shadow Step when he teleports, completely negating the Razor Ice mechanic and not having to touch it at all. Admittedly, I didn't even think of that until after I finished the challenge and forgot to record doing it, but it does work pretty effectively. Don't touch the beams or the orb though, as you'll take a lot of damage, just as a heads up. Again, you can Shadow Step through them, just don't walk into them. After a bit of time of using Frost moves, Xylem will disappear and go into an Intermission sort of phase to begin casting Arcane Annihilation. He'll also summon a ton of clones of himself, and you'll begin taking constant ticking damage, and your movement speed will be reduced until you find out where the real Xylem is. This is pretty hard to see at first, but you're basically looking for like a sparkly, ghost-like image of Xylem, so if your graphics settings are low, then this might be really hard to do. Equally annoying is that the clones of Xylem will all be casting Prismatic Shock, and if you're in the circle surrounding them when the cast goes off, you'll be blown away. You want to kill one of these fake Xylems as fast as you can though, because when they die, they drop a purple bubble thing on the ground that you can stand in. While you're in it, you heal up really fast and don't take any of that pulsing damage, but the bubble slowly shrinks and goes away, so you have to find the real Xylem quickly, because if you don't run into him before the Arcane Annihilation goes off, you die instantly. Make good use of Shadow Step here to move between the Xylems, or you can also pop Cloak of Shadows and just sprint to him because while you have Cloak of Shadows active, the slow debuff is removed. Once you reveal Xylem, he'll be on Arcane mode. Basically, he just starts casting Arcane Barrage a bunch of times, which is just like the Frost Bolts from earlier, and sometimes he'll teleport away so you have to chase him down. The most important move to interrupt in this fight occurs during the Arcane phase, and it's called Draw Power. because as he channels this move, he gains a permanent stacking 5% damage buff, so make sure to kick this immediately. You can also use Kidney Shot, Cheap Shot, and Blind if your kick is on cooldown, so don't hesitate to use any of your CCs to stop him from casting. As the fight goes on, Xylem will again try to cast Arcane Annihilation, and then alternate to Frost moves once again. During both the Frost and Arcane phases, Xylem will now occasionally cast Shadow Barrage, which causes a bunch of purple Void Orbs to come flying across the room. Avoid these and keep DPSing him since he can't do any other moves while he's channeling Shadow Barrage, so it's basically free uptime on him. Once you bring Xylem to 10% health, Phase 2 will begin. Instead of fighting Xylem, you'll be fighting a giant shadow beast thing called Corrupting Shadows. This half of the fight is all about managing your floor space effectively and bursting this guy down as fast as you can, because eventually he hits an enrage window and he basically just one-shots you. So during the second phase, the Corrupting Shadow is going to leave purple smudges all over the ground that will slowly grow larger and larger until they fill the whole floor. Basically, this is the DPS race of the fight, so use any drums or pre-pots you have here to amp up your damage as much as you can. You'll need to keep backpedaling to move this boss out of the puddle so you can DPS it, so I recommend heading to the outer edge of the room and kiting him around that edge. After a little bit, it'll cast Seed of Darkness. When you see this cast, you need to run away from the boss a little bit, because when the debuff expires, you'll spawn 3 Darkness Within adds that will try to reach the boss and heal it. You'll want to kill these before going back after the boss, and slowing them is very helpful since he won't move until these 3 are dead. Make sure you don't hit the Corrupting Shadow with any CCs during this spell, or else he'll immediately come out and chase you once the CC breaks, even if the adds are still alive, meaning he'll heal a bunch and you'll probably wipe. This process will repeat until you've killed 3 sets of those Darkness Within adds, and then the Corrupting Shadow will go into a Berserker Rage and start slapping you until you die. If you end up reaching this point, pop Evasion and you'll get a few extra seconds of survival to finish things up hopefully. And that's the full extent of the Xylem encounter, so next I'll go over my talent recommendations and then additional fight notes that I didn't talk about already. I went with a pretty standard loadout for talents. I chose Weapon Master for the increased single target damage potential of extra backstabs and shadow strikes. Shadow Focus is just such a massive DPS gain that you really can't beat it with all that reduced energy cost during Shadow Dance. Deeper Stratagem was also my go-to pick as per usual, though I could see Marked for Death being pretty handy with all the various adds and Razor Ices and all that stuff in all the phases, so that might actually help out too. For improved self-healing, Soothing Darkness is just a fantastic choice in any solo content. For the level 40 row, your options aren't terribly impactful since I recommend using Crippling Poison during the second phase anyhow, which is a far stronger slow than the Night Terror's effect. Shot in the Dark wouldn't be a bad choice since it lets you get some free no energy stuns out, but I ended up going with Prey on the Weak since it's the only direct DPS gain of the 3, and you can stun Xylem, the Corrupting Shadows, and the Darkness Within adds with it if you want for a little extra DPS. Enveloping Shadows is another fantastic talent and allows for more shadow dances, which is always a good thing. And lastly, I ended up going with Shuriken Tornado, though Master of Shadows would give you a little bit more single target damage if you're a little lacking in phase 2. The reason I chose Tornado is because it lets me generate a ton of combo points whenever the Darkness Within adds show up, and it allowed me to quickly funnel a bunch of Eviscerates to break out of the Razor Ice traps from phase 1. Do note that when you get to the second stage of the Xylem encounter, when the Corrupting Shadow is starting to form, you do drop combat for a bit, so you can actually go with a more single target focused talent loadout for the first half against Xylem, and then swap over to more cleave-oriented talents during the time Xylem is babbling and before that Corrupting Shadow spawns. Generally speaking, the first half of this fight comes down to good usage of our mobility toolkit, since there's just a lot of blinking and teleporting around the room by Xylem. Remember during Arcane Annihilation intermissions to use those healing bubbles to your advantage, but don't take too long reaching Xylem or you just get one shot anyhow. Cloak of Shadows works on a ton of things in this fight, so you can really use it wherever you want, but if you want to cheese the intermissions, you can just pop Cloak and just sprint to him, and really just interrupt whatever you can to avoid getting whittled down by Xylem. Again, he can be blinded and stunned, and so can the Corrupting Shadow, so don't hesitate to use either for a little extra time to line up cooldowns or defensives and all that. In the second half, it is really just a straight up DPS race while making sure to backpedal and to kite the Corrupting Shadow around the edges of the room. Make sure to run away at least like 20 or so yards from the boss when your Seed of Darkness debuff is going to fall off, since the adds spawn wherever you are before trying to return to the shadow to heal it. Also, I'd recommend running Numbing Poison against the first half of the fight with Xylem, since that reduces the amount of casts he can do since he's casting slower. For the second half, definitely switch to Crippling Poison, that way you can slow down the Darkness Within adds so you have more time to kill them before they reach the shadow. Anyways folks, I hope this information helps make it easier for you to earn your new transmog set and get closer to that meta achievement Soaring Spell Tome mount. If the video does prove helpful, a like would absolutely be appreciated, and if you have any additional questions, feel free to ask in a comment below. As always, my appreciation and gratitude to all of my viewers, and especially my patrons, who all help make these Shiba Shenanigans possible. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.